We have actually tried to measure the success of the government. We have this great data that's, proprietary to Bloomberg, and it just hasn't worked out. If you look at constituencies, a lot of them are worse off. House is not affordable. What should the government now do to get back on track?
Well, I think they've spent a long time theorising what levelling up means when actually we need to invest at a huge scale, and it shouldn't just be Legal & General who's been on this levelling up journey for over a decade now, and working with Jim and his colleagues up in the north. We've just underinvested, so it's no surprise that your data is telling us exactly what we are experiencing out there, that there's just massive structural underinvestment in the UK, and that's what we need to sort out.
Yeah, Jim, I mean, first of all, do you agree with that? And two, if you do agree with that, why hasn't the UK government spent more? I mean, they're blaming, of course, inflation, the cost of living on external factors. What could they have done to make levelling up a reality?
So first of all, from the very idea that Nigel and I would argue about anything is like, that kind of a bit of a blow to start with. But listen, I think it's very complicated to give you a quick answer. I mean, the most important thing is, all of the North is not just one place. And linked to what Nigel said about how he's been on it for 10 years, there are some small parts of the North which I bet your data doesn't show is doing so badly. I think central Manchester and Leeds in particular, and some of the already reasonably wealthy suburbs have done pretty well the past 5 years, probably even better than London. But in general, it is a fair statement. And it's because the governments have been completely half-hearted and far too focused on the PR of this agenda. And given the scale of where these challenges come from, which go back to when Nigel and I were in our shorts, the challenge to address this is enormous. It's more important than anything else to do with UK economic policy. And so you can't just play at it. You're going to be really serious.
Jim, let me just break down some of our metrics, right? Because we have this research that basically Bloomberg News has done. So these are our metrics: salaries, home affordability, and productivity. And of all UK constituencies, 91% are doing worse for salaries in the UK. I think we have that graphic that we can bring up again. Home affordability is worse in 88% of constituencies since 2019. And on a third metric, productivity, it's improved in about half of UK constituencies. Now, I didn't mean to say that, you two were arguing, but Jim, is there something that the UK government should do now? Actually, I wish you were, to level up, to make this better?
Listen, I think, the levelling up, the much delayed levelling up white paper, all 300 odd pages of it, is kind of like a PhD thesis in what one would write about what you need to do. Apart from, crucially, education, where, frankly, it's pathetic. But a lot of it in there, and it has all the hallmarks of Andy Haldane, who was heavily involved in it, is actually quite substantive. But as we see with this government, and frankly, another part of the problem of life here and elsewhere, with many governments of the time, what they talk about and what they actually do, there is an enormous gap between. And so they have to need to be really serious about delivering on what the levelling up white paper involves, and that requires massive devolution. We've only just started it in the best places like Greater Manchester, but we need huge amounts of devolved responsibility, much more infrastructure spending that Nigel's one of the, well, not one of, the leading pioneer in the private sector. We need huge efforts on education and skills, and we need a lot of people in these local areas to stop thinking life owes them because of some time in the past when they had a great industrial base, and try and get something that makes them special for the new complex way the world is evolving. And these are big, big challenges, but everybody's got to be really serious about them if they really want to have a chance of succeeding.
Nigel?
No, it's a massive investment required, and we've worked with a number of different areas, but we've only worked with a sample. And Jim's talked about Manchester. We've done outstanding work in Manchester. If you went to Alderley Park, which we bought of AstraZeneca, that's got 250 startups on, 2,500 new jobs in that area. Leeds, which I'm in on Tuesday, and I'm in Birmingham on Monday. There's pockets of fantastic work going on. The Andy Streets and the Tom Reardons of this world are showing real leadership in Leeds and Birmingham, and indeed in Manchester, Andy Burnham and others. So it's not political in that sense. It's actually people, and you have to work hard to get and not be entitled to stuff. And there's too much entitlement going on, and people remembering an historic
past. But the infrastructure spending, I mean, that's not entitlement. It's just the government not spending enough on infrastructure that some of those regions need.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's been crowding out rather than crowding in. You know, I think, you know, we should have had intra-city expenditure, not stuff like HS2, which is, in my view, and I don't know what Jim's view is on it, just a huge waste of money. It would have been better off to give that 100 billion and give Manchester 10 and Birmingham 10 and Leeds 10 billion to actually improve their infrastructure. And that would have been a much better way to deliver economic growth, and then crowd in money from people like ourselves, because we could easily spend another 30 billion. It's not we're constrained by the projects, not by the capital. And that's a lot about ambition at a local level being coupled with support from the central government. And at the moment, the outcome is a very lengthy report, parts of it which are excellently well written, but it's, you know, our version of that document's about 20 pages, but it's 20 pages of what should be done, not actually, you know, the history of what has not been done.
We were talking about levelling up and how, of course, this Bloomberg data says that it's not as good as it could have been, and that's probably a euphemism. Nigel, you also reminded me in the break that this is not only the politicians' fault, it's also private money not getting to the places where it should be. But working from home, has it changed that? Because it's actually cheaper to hire someone that doesn't live in London.
No, I don't think anything's changed in one sense. The government hasn't been doing very much. They've got a plan to start engagement. They're behind their plan. We're executing everything we thought we could execute. And I think you'll see in the next few months we have a few very big announcements about what we're going to do in further cities across the UK. But we're still slightly a lone voice, and we need more growth equity, we need more infrastructure spend by the government, and we need more private sector firms stepping up to invest in there. But we also need the universities stepping up and actually just not sitting there waiting for things to happen, being very proactive and getting out and investing and trying to become like MIT, Harvard and Stanford, which are issues we talked about before.
And Jim, this is, I mean, on education, then I want to get back to maybe healthcare, but Jim, this is something that you've been trying to, you know, do a lot more for. It's universities in the north.
Yeah. I mean, what Nigel has just touched on there is very dear to my heart. You will see in the next couple of days, possibly over the weekend on Monday, an announcement about the so-called first close of Northern Gritstone, which I am the chair of. It's a very new, really exciting project, right in the core of everything we're talking about, which is a patient capital vehicle, not a fund, which is going to be devoted towards investing in startups coming out of northern universities. So it's very ambitious, but it's to try and be directly getting more great ideas coming out of northern universities to end up doing for their locations what MIT has helped do for Boston, as Nigel touched on, but also to be a cog in the wheel of opening up all of this, what has been a vicious circle, starting to become a virtuous one. And it's one of the most important and certainly most interesting things I've done in my career, and I'm very excited about it.
And Jim, congratulations on, of course, this tremendous effort. Does this change the way that the Bank of England should look at things?
I mean,
leveling up.
In the process of getting our first close, that in itself is hugely revealing about the very strange nature of the UK investment world. You know, the UK prides itself on this huge financial sector. But sadly, and Nigel again is a pioneer, there are so few institutional investors that will truly focus on what Nigel and I would both probably describe as patient capital. They are obsessed with liquidity and very conventional, easy ways to superficially at least do things. and none of them, or not many of them, are genuine risk takers. And we're really grateful to the small number of institutional investors that are anchoring Gritstone along with others, because without them we couldn't do it. But there needs to be a huge increase in the way UK institutional investors think about these things.
Yeah.
And the Bank of England and the Treasury, frankly, need to force them to do it, because this is at the core of the UK productivity problem.